Ladies and gentlemen, just earlier today, Vice President J.D. Vance dropped an absolute bombshell, finally breaking his silence on a topic that so far he's neglected to talk about. But also, not only that, later on in today's video, I have some absolutely earth-shattering footage to share with you guys that I promise is pretty much going to blow your mind. But okay, so what am I talking about? The ongoing Jeffrey Epstein situation. Because, ladies and gentlemen, as it would seem, there's a lot more going on here than anyone in the mainstream media is willing to talk about. But okay, so folks, to really kick off today's video, I want you all to take a listen to what President Trump himself had to say about all of this just a couple hours ago. Let it play.
You know, it's a hoax that's been built up way beyond proportion. I can say this, those files were run by the worst scum on earth. They were run by Comey, they were run by Garland, they were run by Biden and all of the people that actually ran the government, including the auto pen. Those files were run for 4 years by those people. If they had anything, I assume they would have released it. The whole thing is a hoax. They ran the files. I was running against somebody that ran the files. If they had something, they would have released. Now, they can easily put something in the files that's a phony. Like, as an example, Christopher Steele, a person you know well, happens to be from your country. But Christopher Steele, as an example, wrote a book, a dossier. We call it the fake news dossier. And the whole thing was a fake. The whole thing was a fake. They can put things in the file that are fake. But those files were run by bad, sick people.
And so, folks, let's all be honest here. That is pretty much the understatement of the century. Now, I'll be honest, you all know that I've been very critical of how the entire Epstein situation has been handled over the last couple of weeks, but is it possible that the Democrats have deliberately manipulated the Epstein files? The answer is, of course, absolutely. And so this is where we get to J.D. Vance. As you all might have noticed, as all of this Epstein drama has been unfolding over the last couple of weeks, J.D. Vance has pretty much stayed out of it. It seems like he's been making an intentional effort to avoid the entire situation altogether. But ladies and gentlemen, that changed just a couple hours ago. You see, just earlier today, J.D. Vance weighed in on this entire situation, and so I want you all to take a listen to what he had to say. But first, I do want to mention real quick that if you guys enjoy the daily news updates, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton. But okay, take a look at this.
Well, let me say just a couple of things. First of all, the president has been very clear. We're not shielding anything. The president has directed the attorney general to release all credible information and, frankly, to go and find additional credible information related to the Jeffrey Epstein case. He's been incredibly transparent about that stuff, but some of that stuff takes time. You've got to assemble that stuff. You've got to compile that stuff. You've got to redact some victims' names so that you protect the victims. But the president has been very clear. He wants full transparency. He's asked that from the attorney general. And I know, because I talk to her all the time, the attorney general is hard at work on that issue right now. But I think I got to make an observation that there's an interesting thing about this case that the American media seems to totally ignore. For 4 years, under Joe Biden's Department of Justice, the media didn't give a damn about the Epstein files or about the Epstein case. For literally 20 years, the story about this scumbag, and he is a scumbag, Jeffrey Epstein, he's dead now, but for 20 years, you had Obama and George W. Bush's Department of Justice go easy on this guy. They didn't fully investigate the case. They didn't show any curiosity about the case. And now Donald J. Trump is asking his Department of Justice to show full transparency. And somehow that's a criticism of Donald J. Trump and not Barack Obama and George W. Bush. If you want to criticize the people who aren't showing full transparency, you ought to go after the administrations that went easy on Jeffrey Epstein, the administrations that concealed this case for 20 years, and the administrations that failed to show full transparency. Donald J. Trump, I'm telling you, he's got nothing to hide. His administration has got nothing to hide, and that's why he's been an advocate for full transparency in this case. He's going to keep on being an advocate for full transparency, but while we're focused on that case, Donald J. Trump is also worried about making sure these great workers get more take-home pay and better jobs, and that's the focus of the administration.
All right, so folks, we have a lot to talk about here, so let's get right into it. J.D. Vance is absolutely correct that the Trump administration really is the first presidential administration to actually try to shed some insight into all of this Epstein stuff. As he said, George Bush didn't do anything, Barack Obama didn't do anything, and as we all know, Joe Biden also didn't do anything. And also, worth noting, despite what the mainstream media would have you believe, this entire situation genuinely is ongoing. As a little bit of a recap here, just in the last couple of days, Ghislaine Maxwell has now had 8 hours of meetings with the Department of Justice. She was also just subpoenaed by the House Oversight Committee and will be answering questions under oath on August 11th, unless of course she decides to ignore the subpoena and face even more legal consequences. And on top of that, the DOJ is now looking for credible information to release to the public in accordance with the notion that much of the information is no longer credible due to the Democrats tampering with everything. But now, folks, like I said a little bit earlier on in today's video, I have some information I want to share with you guys that I think is pretty much going to blow your socks off. So on that note, let me go ahead and introduce you all to a guy named Michael Wolff, who's a political journalist that actually conducted over 100 hours of recorded interviews with Jeffrey Epstein between the years 2014 and 2017. Now, this journalist Michael Wolff actually had something very interesting to say regarding this entire situation between Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. Take a look.
Epstein believed that Donald Trump went to the Palm Beach police and said, Jeffrey Epstein has young girls at his house, thereby beginning the legal process which would ultimately bring Jeffrey Epstein down.
So, do you guys understand what that means? Jeffrey Epstein himself actually personally believed that in 2004 it was Donald Trump that first reported him to the police, which ultimately led to his arrest in 2006 and his criminal conviction in 2008. Have you guys heard about that in the mainstream media? Yeah, I didn't think so. But okay, so do we have any other sort of information that corroborates this story? Well, as it would turn out, we do. Ladies and gentlemen, this is attorney Bradley Edwards, who back in 2008 actually legally represented over 70 of Jeffrey Epstein's victims. And so, folks, I think you guys are going to want to take a listen to what attorney Bradley Edwards had to say about Jeffrey Epstein's relationship with Donald Trump. Let it play.
The only thing that I can say about President Trump is that he is the only person who, in 2009, when I served a lot of subpoenas on a lot of people, or at least gave notice to some pretty connected people that I wanted to talk to them, he is the only person who picked up the phone and said, let's just talk. I'll give you as much time as you want. I'll tell you what you need to know, and was very helpful in the information that he gave, and gave no indication whatsoever that he was involved in anything untoward whatsoever, but had good information that checked out and that helped us, and that we didn't have to take a deposition of him.
And that was in 2009?
That was in 2009. So,
do you know if there's any truth to James Patterson's claims that Trump kicked Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago?
I've definitely heard that.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Have you heard that on the mainstream media? Once again, don't think so. As it would turn out, it seems like Donald Trump not only tipped off the police about Jeffrey Epstein in 2004, he also officially banned Epstein from all of his properties in 2005, but then he also willingly provided information and helped stick up for all of Epstein's victims in 2009. And so, folks, at this point, let me give you my brutally honest opinion about all of this. I have to say, this entire narrative that Donald Trump is currently covering up the Epstein information because he himself is criminally implicated, to me, just seems absolutely absurd. Now, do I think that all of this can be handled in a better way? Yes, of course. However, is it possible or even likely that the Democrats did, in fact, tamper with the files? Also, yes. So for me right now, I'm willing to continue letting my voice be heard, as is our patriotic obligation as Americans, while also watching all of this unfold and let the record show this entire situation is continuing to unfold. But I'll tell you what, folks, this should come as a surprise to absolutely none of you, but with this entire situation, I have never seen more fake news and propaganda in my entire life. Without a doubt, right this very moment, all of the subversive anti-Americans, the globalists, and of course the far-left radical progressives are all trying to spin their narratives. And why? It's simple, really. It's because we are finally trying to put America first.